G'day bartenders, chefs and anyone at home who just wants to make banging drinks. My name is Lockie and welcome to the first ever video on this channel. I've had a couple of videos in the past, me making some little classic cocktails just on my little studio in the corner over there, but I thought it's probably time, considering the house is nice and clean. We've got an inspection coming on Friday. The kitchen's nice and clean at the moment, to film a bit more of a how-to video on how to make one of my favourite products that I've come up with, and that's called the milk Negroni. Now, I'm a bartender. I used to work in an Italian restaurant, and when we opened the restaurant, I was in charge of making a few cocktails for the menu, and we had a tiramisu on offering as well. So I thought it'd be great to make a Negroni style cocktail that would work really well with the tiramisu. A bit of trial and error later, we came up with a recipe that was pretty banging. It involves milk washing a classic Negroni using particular spices and types of sugars that work really well with the tiramisu. So we're gonna be making it today. So from here, I'm gonna go shopping, get all the ingredients I don't have. You might be able to see back there is my liquor cabinet, so I've got a few little bits and bobs happening there, but there's a few things I still need as well. So I'm gonna go shopping, I'm gonna go buy some ingredients, and I'll be back. Gone to the shops, did a little bit of a stock take in the kitchen, realised there's actually not much we need, so I'm gonna get that up now. Got a few other things as well. Can't really go to the supermarket without getting the essentials. So the milk I chose to get was long life in cartons. One, because we're going to be warming this milk up, so it already comes at room temperature. And secondly, it's compartmentalized, so I don't need to open up a 2-litre thing of milk and have to use it within a few days. I can do 200 mils at a time. All right, I'm back. So as you can see, I already had a few ingredients. Let's go through them all really quickly, and then we'll see what we bought. Of course, we're going to be using a little bit of Campari. Wouldn't be a Negroni without one. Got some dried vermouth here. Haven't used this before, the maiden note. A little bit of Earl Grey tea. It's meant to be chai, but this is the only substitute we'll be using for the recipe today. Citric acid. Gotta have that. Some cloves, whole cloves. Some ground cinnamon. Some brown sugar, some cacao, not the sweetened stuff, this is the raw ground cacao. This is nutmeg, whole nutmeg, a little bit of honey. Bought some bread, not related for the recipe. Aperol, mixing that with a bit of Campari. Gin, opted for Tanqueray in this case, that's what I've always been using. So ignore that, some eggs. This is the milk I purchased. So these are our ingredients. I'm gonna have a little bit of breakfast and then we're gonna get into it. All right, so here are the ingredients here. I've taken the liberty, I'm only gonna be making 5 serves worth, so the recipe down below is for 10. So I've taken the liberty of writing out the ingredients and then halving all proportions just so we can make 5 serves worth. I also have some orange. Usually this recipe calls to leave the ingredients overnight, just so everything can sort of marry together. Because we're going to be doing a faster version of this, I'm going to be basically dicing the orange rind rather than peeling orange rind and letting it infuse overnight. And all the ingredients and all the spices we'll be using will be ground as well. So we've got ground cinnamon rather than whole cinnamon. I'm going to be pestle and mortaring these cloves. And the nutmeg as well is going to be grated. So. We've got our ingredients here. This is a mix of our miniature ingredients. We've got our spices in here, cinnamon, clove, nutmeg. We've got cacao in there and citric acid as well. Orange rinds, I've just diced them up there, looking at 4.5 grams of orange rind. We've got our tea brewing just here. I've put 60 grams of brown sugar straight into a bowl just here. All that we really need to add is the honey. And I thought it would be a good opportunity to show you what equipment I'm using. So I'm just using 2 types of scales. This is a regular kitchen scale, measured in grams, whereas this is something I bought in Amsterdam to measure smaller quantities. This goes to 0.01 of a gram. So if I put our spices on there, for instance, 14.47 grams. And that's way useful for measuring smaller and smaller decrements. So just adding to our sugar, the honey, this is going to be the bowl we're going to be mixing everything together in. We're going to be adding 4.5 grams, so we'll just try and estimate. 1, 2, 4, about 4 there, beautiful. Leave that to the side. And to this we're going to be adding everything else. So we're going to mix our dry ingredients just in there as well. Beautiful. Going to get our orange rinds. I'll pick up the board. There we go. Dump it in. Our tea. Hot, so just be careful. Awesome. And then we're going to move into our spirit. So we're looking at 150 mils of the gin, which I should have decrements on here for that. What's the best way to set this up? Alrighty. Might be able to see it like that. Slightly. Alrighty, 150 right there. So we're doing 150 of the gin. Doesn't have to be exact, but I try my best. Beyond that, we're looking at 50 mils of Campari. I've only got a little bit left, so hopefully it stretches to the 200 mark. And nailed it. Aperol, a little bit heavier on the Aperol, another 100 mils. So this will take us to 300. And then finally our dry vermouth, using the maid knife, looking at 150 mils of the vermouth for this many portions, so up to 450 is where we're going for this. Beautiful. All right, and then it's going to be a very simple, throw this into our mixture. We've got over here. And stir to dissolve. I believe I have something that would work well in this case. Yep. Stir to dissolve. Now this is something you'd want to leave overnight if possible, just to let those flavours marry. But we're just going to go ahead and move on to the next step. Alright, so for this recipe, we're doing 1/5 portions. We're going to be doing, it's going to be 337.5 mils. So if I just get 37 to register on the scales here. 1,000. Beautiful. And then 300 in the jug, because yeah, pretty easy. So 200 mil. Ooh, yummy milk, look at that. 200 mil containers, so we should be able to get 300 pretty easily. Or somewhere close to. Just there, beautiful. Straight in the saucepan. So, the way we clarify this milk Negroni, so see how murky and dark it is? Now we're going to be creating a really nice, texturous, golden amber, clear liquid at the end. Let's see how murky it is. We're going to be using a technique called milk clarification. And that is using milk to create solids in quite thick, dense solids in our mix, and using those solids to strain everything out, including the small little particles as well. The way that this works is we put our milk on the stove and warm it up. So I'm just going to put that on a high heat and wait for that to come to a boil. And then we're going to add our milk Negroni. Well, our Negroni mixture from back here, I'm going to be adding this in a slow stream to the boiling milk. It'll drop the temperature. The acid, because we did add the citric acid into this mix, will react much like in the production of making cheese. We're going to be creating curds and whey, and the acid is going to react with the milk proteins inside the full cream milk, which is why you need full cream, because there's a higher concentration of those proteins, and coagulate basically. So when milk goes sour, you sort of see something similar. It gets quite thick as well, creates solids. We're going to be forcing that into this reaction. So we're going to be creating those milk solids. It'll coagulate, all those milk proteins will be pulled together into clumps, and then that's what we're going to be straining out to get our final liquid. Alrighty, so our milk's coming up to temperature. I'm going to try and get a nice close-up of what's going to be happening when we pour in our Negroni mix. And the way we're going to do it is, once it does come to the boil, you'll notice because it'll start to rise, I'm going to take it off the heat so it doesn't overflow. I don't think it will because of the pot size and also how much milk is in there. And then we're going to slowly add our Negroni mix into a thin stream, just so we can try and thoroughly mix the Negroni mix into the milk without having to disturb the whole process too much. I don't want to have to go in there and start stirring it, because the milk solids that do form, we don't want to really break them up, because it's such a good thing to keep them together and strain them out in one big chunk rather than lots of little ones. So you can start to see now, it's starting to boil up. It'll start rising quite rapidly. I'm going to get ready with the Negroni mix. Here it comes. I'm turning it off the heat. Heat's off. And then the Negroni mix. Try and do this without obstructing the view of the camera. Yeah, we're good. Thin stream. Just a little bit like that, and you'll see it'll start to coagulate and form those solids. And that's the acid mixing with the milk proteins of milk. Look at that. Now again, ideally you want to give it plenty of time to coagulate, and then just to create those solids and make sure they're quite large so we can strain them out. Alrighty, here we go. So we've got a pretty simple setup. We've got our milk Negroni mixture just here. It's looking as much like vomit as ever. And a bottle, funnel, and a little bit of coffee filter as well. So it's going to be a pretty simple, just pour straight into the coffee filter. If I can do that without it overflowing. It's going to be a slow process. Those curds are going to start getting trapped inside the filter. So you see it's coming down quite quickly at the moment. With our lovely milk Negroni coming out the bottom. That's going to start slowing down, and the more we add, the slower it's going to take. So I'm just going to let that sit for about an hour or so. We'll come back to it and maybe have a first little bit of a taste. Alright, so I've just realised that I wasn't recording audio on my main camera, so I've turned that back on and hopefully we're back to normal. At this point, while we're waiting for the milk Negroni to strain, I thought it'd be important to make a few notes and clarify a few things, no pun intended. But what we're using at the moment, right, is a coffee filter. So it's that sort of shape. It's got little holes in it that allows the liquid to pass through. It's really quite handy to understand how straining works, because there's two different types of straining, right? We're using, I guess, sort of like a force straining here, where we're using the size of these holes to determine how big the particles that pass through are allowed to be. But there's another type of straining as well, which we can utilize with the milk Negroni, and I have in the past. I do it with the banana wine at work as well. And it's a bit more of a different technique, and I'll explain. So say you've got a colander here, and it's a wire colander, right? And those holes only allow a certain size particle to come through, right? And that's just a traditional method of straining I've just mentioned. Now let's take a look at one of those holes a bit closer up. So say this is one of the square holes in a conventional strainer, and say the particle size that you have is that big. So it's approximately the same size, but this one's slightly smaller, so it should be able to pass through. What you actually have in your liquid is lots of particles, similar sort of size, and they're bumping around each other, right? If you were to strain a normal liquid with a similar sort of strain hole, then most of it will pass through, but what will happen on occasion, and this happens quite randomly, is two of those blocks will get jammed in the strainer, something similar to that. What basically that happens is, because of the particles getting blocked, it creates a new type of strainer with a more dense filtration. You'll see that the only gaps that the liquid can pass through now are these two gaps, which means if you've got two more blocks that happen here, even smaller gaps. So what ends up happening is you get quite a lot of jamming happening inside the strainer, and it creates smaller and smaller gaps to filter through, and you end up getting a cleaner result in and of itself. So I guess you could say that the liquid itself is doing the straining. In our case, we're making curds and we're making whey. So these are the curds that are formed, and they're in a liquid of whey. What we're trying to capture is the whey, and we're trying to remove the curds, right? So we're using more of a coffee filter up here, but we could be using a larger sieve with larger holes in it. And I have done this in the past where our curds will get jammed in those holes and the whey will squirt out. When you do pour it, it takes a few attempts to have everything jam up. So pour your liquid into it. Most of it will pass through, some of it will jam, and then you pour the liquid that came out back through it again. More will jam, less liquid will come out. You do it again, and you continue doing it until when you see you'll have your bucket with all your holes and they'll all be jammed up. But you'll be able to see the liquid that's coming out. You'll be able to eyeball it and you'll see how clear it is. And if you're happy with that clarity, then whatever you have down here, pour it very carefully back into the top, put a clean bucket underneath, and you'll capture everything that you want. Alrighty, so I'm just editing part of the video now. It's been sitting in the fridge for a while. I've had it sitting in the freezer as well. You should really tell there, but nice little tasting coupe. It's clear, it's amber. Smells quite spicy. It's got that classic Negroni bite to it. Yeah, that's all I can recommend is leave it in the bottle, leave it in the fridge, and whenever you have friends over, it's easy as, just pull it out, some nice frosted glasses and give it a taste. What's really unique I think about this is because we're using the milk and we're pulling the whey from separating the curds and the whey from the milk, it adds quite a lot of silky sort of texture to the drink, and I think that's what makes it unique. You'll see the drink itself is not red like a classic Negroni, it's golden amber, and a lot of people will say it's not really a Negroni. Like, what's the point in having a drink that's not bright red but super bitter? And to them I say I don't care. Like, drink whatever you enjoy and create whatever you want to create. Cheers. Alrighty, before I do go, I just wanted to say a big thank you for watching the video. This is like I said, my first video on YouTube. If I do continue to create videos, I want the feedback of everyone who's been watching. I do my own ferments, this is the milk washing of the milk Negroni, things like that. So if you have any feedback, please leave it in the comments below. If you liked it, like the video, and if you want to see some more, it'd be great to get some feedback and maybe even a little subscribe here or there. Cheers.